Sometimes, the worst thing ain't being rejected, it's being judged before you can speak a single word. The train wheezed to a stop at Iron Pass Station, belching black smoke into the Oregon sky. October wind cut through the platform like a blade, carrying the scent of pine and coming snow. Harriet Mae Dawson gripped her worn carpetbag tighter, her knuckles white beneath work-roughened skin. She'd traveled 3 days from Missouri, sleeping upright on hard benches, eating nothing but cold biscuits and hope. The letter in her pocket had been read so many times the paper felt soft as cloth. Jedediah Graves had written with a steady hand about needing a wife, about his ranch outside town, about building a life together. His photograph showed a clean-shaven man with serious eyes. She'd sent hers back taken 2 years ago when her hair was pinned proper and her Sunday dress still had all its buttons. She stepped onto the platform, boot heels clicking on worn wood. Other passengers brushed past merchants in city clothes, miners with dirty faces, women clutching children's hands. Harriet stood alone, searching the crowd for those serious eyes from the photograph. "Miss Dawson." She turned toward the voice. The man standing there wore clean clothes and polished boots, just like his letter promised. But his face, Lord, his face told a different story. Jedediah Graves looked at her the way a buyer looks at livestock, eyes traveling from her travel-stained dress to her sun-darkened skin, lingering on her small frame and calloused hands, visible even through her mended gloves. Mr. Graves," she tried to smile, though her cheeks felt stiff from cold and worry. "I'm pleased to finally—" "You're not what I expected." His words fell between them like stones in still water. "Your letter said you were educated, a lady of proper breeding." "I am educated, sir. I can read and write, do figures, and—" "Oh, look at you." He stepped back, shaking his head. "Those hands have seen field work. That skin's been burnt by harvest sun. You're no more a lady than—" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. "I thought you'd be someone who could manage a proper household, receive guests, not someone who looks fresh from behind a plow." Heat rose in Harriet's cheeks despite the cold. "I've managed my family's house since I was 12, cooked, cleaned, mended." "That's not what I advertised for." Jed's voice turned sharp as winter ice. "I need a wife who'll elevate my standing in town, not drag it through the mud. A woman who knows which fork to use at dinner, who can host the church ladies for tea. I can learn." "Can you learn to be taller, to have hands that haven't been ruined by lye soap and chicken plucking?" He pulled an envelope from his coat. "Here's enough for return fare. There's a boarding house on 2nd Street if you need a night's rest before the next train east." Harriet stared at the envelope but didn't take it. "You're sending me back without giving me a chance." "I'm saving us both the embarrassment. Miss Dawson, you're not suited for the life I'm building." He set the envelope on her carpetbag when she wouldn't take it. "The boarding house is that way. Good day." He turned and walked away, his polished boots clicking with purpose. Harriet stood frozen on the platform as the crowd thinned around her. The envelope slipped from her bag, caught by the wind, tumbling across the wooden planks. She didn't chase it. The station agent, a grizzled man with kind eyes, approached carefully. "Miss Train's done unloading. Platform's closing soon." "Yes, thank you." Her voice came out steady, though her insides felt like jelly. She picked up her bag and walked toward town with her chin high, though she had no idea where she was going. Iron Pass spread before her like a painting. Wooden buildings lined the main street. Mountains rose sharp against the sky, and everywhere the smell of sawdust and horse mixed with pine. Men tipped their hats as she passed, but their eyes lingered too long, noting her lack of companion, her single bag, her uncertain step. She paused outside the boarding house Jed had mentioned. Through the window, she could see women in silk dresses taking tea, their soft hands holding delicate china. Their laughter floated through the glass like music from another world. Harriet looked down at her own hands, square palms, short nails, a scar across one thumb from a kitchen knife. Working hands, surviving hands. She turned away from the boarding house and kept walking. The main street gave way to smaller roads, then dirt paths. The town faded behind her as she climbed toward the tree line, drawn by something she couldn't name. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the simple fact that she'd rather freeze in the forest than take charity from a man who judged her worth by the softness of her skin. The carpetbag grew heavy. Her boots, mended twice already, let in cold through a split seam. But she kept walking until the town became a smudge below and the pines closed around her like sanctuary. Here, at least, she could think without the weight of watching eyes. A crack of breaking wood made her freeze. She'd grown up rural enough to know that sound, something large moving through brush. Bear, maybe? Or worse, men who'd seen a woman walking alone and followed. Her hand went to the small knife in her pocket, though what good it would do against either threat, she couldn't say. But the figure that emerged from the shadows moved too smooth for a bear, too quiet for most men. Tall as a barn door and broad through the shoulders, dressed in leather and wool the color of bark. Dark hair hung past his collar, and a full beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that held her gray as winter sky, watching her with the patience of something wild. "You're heading nowhere in particular," he said, not a question. His voice was low, rough from disuse. "That's my business." She lifted her chin, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Snow's coming, temperatures dropping fast. That coat won't keep you warm past dark." "I'll manage." He studied her with those wolf eyes, taking in her thin coat, her worn boots, the determined set of her jaw. "Town's that way." He pointed back the way she'd come. "I know where town is." "But you're not going back." Again, not a question. Harriet felt tears threaten for the first time since Jed walked away. This stranger's simple understanding that sometimes a person couldn't go back, no matter the sense of it, nearly undid her careful composure. "There's nothing there for me," she admitted. He nodded slow, like he'd expected that answer. "My place is a mile up. Nothing fancy, just a cabin. But it's got walls and a roof, a stove that works. No promises beyond that." She should have been afraid. A strange man. An isolated cabin, no one knowing where she'd gone. But something in his manner, the way he kept distance between them, the way he'd offered shelter like stating a fact rather than making a proposition, eased her fear. "Why?" she asked. He shrugged. "Cold doesn't care about your troubles. It'll kill you just the same." He turned and started walking uphill. "You coming or not?" Harriet hesitated one heartbeat, then two. Behind her lay town with its boarding houses and return tickets and proper ladies taking tea. Ahead walked a man who'd offered nothing but shelter from the storm. She followed him into the trees. The man moved through the forest like he was part of it, stepping over roots and ducking branches without looking. Harriet struggled to keep pace, her carpetbag catching on bushes, her boots sliding on pine needles slick with afternoon dew. He never looked back, but twice he slowed when she fell too far behind, waiting silent as a tree until she caught up. The path, if you could call it that, wound upward through stands of Douglas fir and hemlock. The air grew thinner, colder, carrying the sharp scent of coming snow. Harriet's breath came in white puffs, and her fingers went numb around the bag handle. Still, she didn't complain. Complaints were for people who had choices. After what felt like hours, but was probably less than one, the trees opened onto a small clearing. A cabin sat against the hillside like it had grown there, logs weathered silver gray. A stone chimney releasing a thin line of smoke. It wasn't much bigger than the chicken coop back home, but the roof looked solid and the walls stood straight. "Wait here." The man she realized, she didn't even know his name, disappeared inside. She heard the scrape of metal on stone, the thud of wood being moved. When he returned, he'd shed his outer coat, revealing a wool shirt patched at the elbows. "Fire's going. Come on." The cabin's interior was exactly what the outside promised: simple, clean, functional. One room with a stove in the corner, a narrow bed against one wall, a table with two mismatched chairs. Shelves held supplies in neat rows: coffee, flour, salt, beans. Tools hung from pegs, axes, saws, traps, everything in its place, everything with a purpose. "Sit." He pointed to a chair near the stove. "You're shaking." Harriet hadn't realized she was. The warmth hit her like a wall, making her skin prickle and her eyes water. She sank into the chair, setting her bag at her feet. The man filled a battered pot with water from a bucket, set it on the stove. "Coffee'll be ready soon. There's venison stew from yesterday, still good. I don't want to take your food." He turned those gray eyes on her. "You'd rather starve out of pride." The blunt question startled a laugh from her, short and bitter. "But real? No, I suppose not." "Good. Pride's a luxury for people with full bellies." He pulled a bowl from a shelf, ladled thick stew into it. The smell made her stomach clench with hunger. She couldn't remember the last hot meal she'd had. He set the bowl in front of her with a spoon, then retreated to the far side of the cabin, busying himself with checking his traps, giving her space to eat without watching. The small kindness made her throat tight. The stew was simple venison, wild onions, some kind of root vegetable, but it tasted like salvation. She ate slowly, forcing herself not to wolf it down. The coffee, when it came, was strong enough to strip paint, but it chased the last of the cold from her bones. "Thank you," she said when the bowl was empty. He nodded, refilling her coffee cup. "Name's Calder Shaw." "Harriet Dawson." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Mr. Shaw." "Calder's fine. We're not in town." "Calder, then why did you help me?" He considered the question, eyes on the fire visible through the stove grate. "Saw you at the station. Saw Graves turn you away." His jaw tightened. Man like that, he orders a wife like he'd order a horse. Sends her back if she's not the right color. Heat flooded Harriet's cheeks. "You saw that?" "Was loading pelts at the freight office. Couldn't help but notice." He shrugged. "Nothing wrong with hands that have done honest work. Nothing wrong with being small, either. Graves is a fool." The simple defense of her worth from a stranger. No less threatened tears again. She blinked them back. "Still doesn't explain why you followed me." Didn't follow. Was heading home anyway. But when I saw you walking toward the tree line with night coming." He shook his head. "Seen what cold does to people who aren't prepared. Wouldn't wish that on anyone." "So you just invite strange women to your cabin?" A sound that might have been a laugh rumbled in his chest. "First time for everything. Don't worry, I'll be sleeping in the storage shed. You'll have the cabin to yourself." "I can't turn you out of your own home." "You're not. I'm choosing it." He stood, joints popping. "There's a bar for the door. Water in the bucket, chamber pot under the bed. Outhouses behind the cabin. Take the lantern if you go at night. Mountain cats hunt these woods." The casual mention of mountain cats made her shiver. "How long have you lived here?" 6 years, give or take. "Alone." His shoulders tensed. Yes, the single word carried weight, like a door closing. Harriet didn't push. "Well, I appreciate the kindness. I'll be gone in the morning." "To where?" The question she'd been avoiding. "I'll figure something out." Calder studied her with those patient wolf eyes. "Storm's coming. Real snow, not just flurries. You try to walk back to town tomorrow. They'll find your body come spring thaw. Then I'll wait for the storm to pass. Could be days, could be weeks. Then I'll—" She stopped, frustration rising. "I don't know. All right, I don't know what I'll do. I spent everything I had on train fare. I can't go back to Missouri, nothing there but disappointment and my brother's wife, who made it clear I'd overstayed my welcome. Can't stay in town without money for the boarding house. So I don't know." The words hung in the air between them. Calder moved to a trunk near the bed, pulled out blankets and a heavy coat that had seen better days. "They're too small for me." Should fit you well enough. He set them on the table. You can stay through the storm. After that, we'll see. I can't. Can't what except help? His voice stayed level, but there was something underneath. You're not the first person to need shelter. Won't be the last. These mountains don't care about your pride or your past. They'll kill you all the same. So you can take what's offered, or you can freeze. Your choice. Harriet looked at the blankets, the coat, this strange man who talked about death as casual as weather. What do you want in return? Nothing. Nobody offers something for nothing. I do. He moved toward the door. Bar this behind me. I'll knock come morning 3 raps, then 2. Don't open for any other pattern. Why would someone else knock? He paused, hand on the latch. Probably won't, but these woods. Sometimes people pass through who've got no good intentions. The knock lets you know it's safe. Then he was gone, pulling the door shut behind him. Harriet sat frozen for a moment before remembering to bar the door. The wooden beam was solid, fitting into iron brackets. Safe as houses, her mother would have said. She explored the cabin slowly, feeling like an intruder despite Calder's permission. Everything spoke of a solitary life lived with careful routine. No photographs, no letters, no woman's touch anywhere. Just survival, pared down to its essence. The coat fit like it was made for her. The wool was soft with age, patched in places but clean. She wondered whose it had been, then pushed the thought away. Some questions didn't need asking. Outside, wind began to howl through the trees. The first snowflakes hit the windows fat and lazy now, but promising worse to come. Harriet banked the fire in the stove like her father had taught her, checked the door bar twice, then curled up on the narrow bed fully clothed. She expected to lie awake, worried about sleeping in a strange man's cabin. Instead, exhaustion pulled her under like deep water. Her last thought was how the pillow smelled of pine sap and wood smoke, clean and wild as the forest itself. Sometime in the night, she woke to the sound of something scratching at the walls. Her heart hammered until she realized it was just tree branches, driven by the rising wind. Through the window, she could see snow falling thick and fast, erasing the world in white. In the morning, 3 knocks would come, then 2, a stranger's pattern of safety in a world that had shown her precious little of it. But for now, she was warm and fed and sheltered. And that was enough. That was more than enough. 3 knocks, then 2. The pattern pulled Harriet from sleep just as pale light crept through the frost-covered windows. She sat up, disoriented, then remembered where she was. The fire had died to embers, leaving the cabin cold enough to see her breath. "Miss Dawson," Calder's voice came muffled through the door. She hurried to lift the bar, pulling the door open to find him covered in snow, carrying an armload of split wood. His beard was white with frost, but his eyes were alert, scanning her face like he was checking for damage. "Morning," she said, stepping aside. He stomped his boots on the threshold before entering, moving straight to the stove. Within minutes, he had the fire roaring again, warmth spreading through the small space. Only then did he turn to look at her properly. "Sleep all right. Better than I have in weeks." It was true. Despite everything, the rejection, the uncertainty, the strangeness of it all, she'd slept deep and dreamless. Good. He set a basket on the table. Brought eggs from the coop, some bacon. Storm settled in proper. We'll be snowed in for a while. "We," she noticed the plural. "I thought you'd want your cabin back once the worst passed." "Storage shed's not built for this kind of cold. Lost some chickens to a weasel anyway, need to repair the coop." He pulled a skillet from its hook. "Unless you're uncomfortable with the arrangement, there's room enough if we're careful about it." Harriet considered. Outside, snow fell in sheets, erasing the world beyond the windows. Inside, a man she'd known less than a day was offering to share his space with the same matter-of-fact manner he'd offered shelter. "I can cook," she said finally, "and clean. Mend what needs mending. I won't be a burden. Something shifted in his expression, surprise. Maybe. Wasn't worried about that. Still, I pay my way. He nodded, handing her the skillet. Fair enough. They settled into a rhythm quicker than Harriet would have thought possible. She cooked breakfast while he tended the animals. They ate in companionable silence. Then he showed her where things were kept, what needed doing. His life was ordered, practical, each task flowing into the next with the ease of long practice. By afternoon, she'd inventoried his mending pile, shirts worn through at the elbows, socks more whole than wool, a coat with a ripped lining. She sat up near the window where the light was best, threading a needle with steady hands. Calder worked on the other side of the cabin, repairing a pack saddle. They didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It reminded her of working alongside her father in the barn, two people focused on their tasks, sharing space without needing to fill it with words. You're good at that, he said eventually, watching her tiny, even stitches. Had plenty of practice. 5 brothers, all hard on clothes. She bit off a thread. You've been doing your own mending? Such as it is. She held up a shirt where he'd clearly tried to patch a hole, the stitches loose and crooked. This won't hold through one wearing. Made do so far. Well, now you don't have to. She picked out his stitches carefully, started over with proper technique. Your coat, the one you gave me. Whose was it? His hands stilled on the leather. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my wife's. The words sat heavy between them. Harriet kept her eyes on her needle, giving him space to continue or not. Mary, he said finally. Died 6 years back. Fever took her and our boy both. I'm sorry. Long time ago now. But not long enough, she thought, hearing the carefully controlled pain in his voice. Is that when you came here? After, couldn't stay in town. Too many memories, too many people looking at me with pity. He resumed working on the saddle. Found this place, fixed it up. Been here since, alone. By choice. She understood that, after her parents died. Everyone in their Missouri town had opinions about what she should do, where she should go, who she should marry. The weight of their well-meaning interference had been suffocating. I won't ask more, she said. Appreciate that. They worked until the light faded. Calder lit lanterns while Harriet made supper from what was on hand beans with bacon. Cornbread baked in a covered pot. Simple fare, but filling. They ate as snow continued to fall, the wind howling like a living thing. Where will you sleep? She asked as he cleared the dishes. Made a pallet by the stove, warmest spot besides the bed. That's not right. It's your home. Miss Dawson. He turned to face her. I offered shelter. You accepted. That's the end of it. I've slept on harder ground than this floor, believe me. She wanted to argue, but recognized the futility. Calder Shaw was not a man who changed his mind easily. Then thank you. Again. He grunted acknowledgement, spreading blankets near the stove with military precision. Harriet retreated to the bed, pulling the curtain he'd rigged for privacy. She changed into her nightgown quickly, the cold raising goosebumps on her skin. Calder, she called softly. Yeah. Why did your wife's things survive when you clearly... She hesitated, not sure how to phrase it delicately. When I got rid of everything else, his voice was thoughtful. Couldn't bring myself to burn them. Couldn't give them away either. So they sat in that trunk. Guess I was waiting. For what? For someone who needed them more than I needed the memories. The next days fell into a pattern. Morning started with Calder's knock. Breakfast prepared together, then separate tasks that kept the cabin running. Harriet attacked the mending pile with determination while Calder worked on repairs, tended animals, brought in wood. They came together for meals, sharing small talk about the work, the weather. Nothing too personal. But comfort grew between them, built from small kindnesses. The way he always made sure she had the chair nearest the stove, How she started making his coffee exactly how he liked it, strong enough to float a horseshoe. The way they learned to move around each other in the small space without colliding. A dance of consideration. On the fourth night, the storm finally broke. Stars appeared between racing clouds, and the temperature plummeted. Harriet woke to find her breath freezing in the air, the fire nearly dead. She slipped from bed, intending to add wood, but found Calder already up, feeding the stove. "Go back to bed," he said without turning. "Just got cold is all." But she saw how he held his shoulder, the stiff way he moved. "You're hurt." "Old injury, cold makes it ache some." She moved closer, saw the scar tissue peeking above his collar. "What happened?" "Bear." He straightened, rolling the shoulder carefully. "First winter here, I was green, stupid. Lucky it only took some hide and muscle." "Let me see." "It's fine." "Calder Shaw, you've done nothing but help me for days. Let me return the favor." He looked at her, really looked, maybe for the first time. Hair loose around her shoulders, wrapped in one of Mary's shawls, chin set with determination. Something shifted in his expression. "Stubborn woman," he muttered, but pulled his shirt over his head. The scars were worse than she'd imagined. Claw marks raked from shoulder to mid-back, the tissue thick and ropey. But it was the careful way he held himself that told her how much it hurt. "Sit," she ordered. "I have liniment in my bag. My father used it for horse injuries, but it works on people too." She retrieved the bottle, warning him it would be cold before smoothing the pungent mixture over the damaged muscle. He tensed at first, then gradually relaxed as her hands worked out the knots. "You've done this before," he said. "Brothers," she reminded him. "They were always getting hurt, thrown from horses, kicked by cows, fighting each other. Someone had to patch them up. Their loss," he said quietly, "letting you go." Her hands stilled. "They had their own families to worry about. I was just an extra mouth to feed." "Their loss," he repeated, firmer this time. She resumed working in silence, aware suddenly of the intimacy of the moment, his skin warm under her hands, the firelight dancing across the scars, the absolute trust it took for him to let her see him vulnerable. When she finished, he pulled his shirt back on, not quite meeting her eyes. "Thank you." "You're welcome." They stood there, the space between them charged with something new. Then Calder cleared his throat, gestured to the bed. "You should sleep. Morning comes early." She nodded, retreating to safety behind the curtain. But sleep was slow coming, her hands still remembering the feel of his skin, the way he'd relaxed under her touch, the way he'd said their loss like he meant it. Outside, the wind died to nothing, leaving only the soft whisper of falling snow. Inside, two people who'd been alone too long lay awake in the dark, pretending they weren't aware of each other's breathing, pretending something hadn't shifted between them, pretending they weren't both a little less alone than they'd been that morning. The snow finally stopped after a week, leaving the world transformed. Harriet stood at the cabin window, marveling at how the familiar landscape had become foreign, every sharp edge softened, every dark shadow made brilliant white. The quiet was absolute, as if the earth itself held its breath. Thinking of heading to town, Calder said behind her, "Need supplies, salt, coffee, ammunition." She turned from the window. "The snow's deep." "Not too deep for snowshoes. Should be back by dark." He paused, something uncertain in his expression. "Unless you want to come. Could use help carrying supplies." The invitation surprised them both. In the days since she'd tended his shoulder, they'd maintained careful boundaries, polite distance, professional courtesy. But something had shifted that night, and they'd been dancing around it ever since. "I'd like that," she said, "if you have extra snowshoes." "Do." He moved to a corner, pulled out a smaller pair. These were they should fit. Mary's. She knew without asking. Everything that fit her had been Mary's. She wondered if it hurt him to see another woman wearing his wife's things, or if it eased something to see them used again. The journey to town took twice as long as normal, but Harriet didn't mind. The forest was magical under its white blanket, and Calder knew its secrets, showing her where deer had sheltered, pointing out fox tracks, identifying birds by their calls. He talked more on that walk than he had all week, as if the open sky loosened his tongue. They entered Iron Pass from the north, avoiding the main street at first. But a small town has few secrets, and within minutes Harriet felt eyes on them. Women peered from shop windows. Men paused in their work to stare. "Ignore them," Calder said quietly. "They're wondering who I am, why I'm with you. Let them wonder." They entered Morrison's general store, bell chiming overhead. The warmth hit Harriet like a wall after the cold outside. The store smelled of pickle brine and leather, coffee and cloth civilization distilled into scent. Shaw, the proprietor, a thin man with careful eyes, nodded greeting. "Been a while." "Morrison." Calder moved toward the counter. "Need the usual extra coffee? More salt than normal?" Morrison's gaze slid to Harriet. "And who might this be?" "Miss Dawson staying through the storm," Calder said evenly. "She needs fabric for clothing. Whatever she picks, add it to my account." "Calder, no," Harriet started. "You need clothes that fit proper. Choose what you need." His tone brooked no argument. She wanted to protest but recognized the sense of it. She'd been washing her single change of clothes at night, wearing Mary's things that hung loose on her smaller frame. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. While Calder handled his business, she moved to the fabric section. Her fingers trailed over bolts of cloth practical wool, sturdy cotton, even some prettier calico that made her heart ache with want. She selected modestly dark wool for a skirt, plain cotton for shirts, thread and buttons. "That all you need?" a voice asked. Harriet turned to find a woman about her age. Wheat blonde hair pinned severely back. Everything about her screamed respectability, from her pressed collar to her spotless gloves. "I believe so, yes." "I'm Mrs. Eleanor Hartley. My husband owns the bank." She studied Harriet with sharp curiosity. "You're the woman from the train, the one Jedediah Graves sent away." Heat flooded Harriet's cheeks. "News travels fast. It's a small town. We hear things." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "We also hear you've taken up with Calder Shaw." "Mister, Shaw offered shelter from the storm. That's all." "Is it?" Eleanor stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You seem like a decent woman, despite your circumstances, so I'll offer you some Christian counsel. That man is dangerous. He killed 2 men in Copper Hill, shot them dead over a land dispute." "I don't listen to gossip." "It's not gossip. My cousin lived there, saw it happen. Shaw's got darkness in him, violence. No decent woman should be alone with him." "He's been nothing but kind." "The devil can appear kind when it suits him." Eleanor gripped Harriet's arm. "There's a reason he lives alone in those woods. A reason his wife died so sudden. You'd do well to remember that." "Mrs. Hartley." Calder's voice cut through the store like a blade. He stood by the counter, gray eyes fixed on Eleanor's hand on Harriet's arm. "Something you need." Eleanor released Harriet, stepping back. "Just offering neighborly advice to Miss Dawson." "Generous of you." His tone suggested otherwise. "We're finished here." Morrison had wrapped their purchases in brown paper, stacking them on the counter. Harriet noticed how he avoided Calder's eyes, how his hands shook slightly as he made change. Fear, she realized. They were all afraid of him. They left the store in tense silence. Harriet helped load supplies into the pack Calder carried, mind churning with Eleanor's words. Killed 2 men, shot them dead. Violence and darkness. "You want to ask?" Calder said as they started back toward the forest. "So ask. Is it true about Copper Hill?" "Yes." The simple admission hit her like cold water. She'd expected denial, explanation, something besides that flat acknowledgement. You killed 2 men.
I did.
Why? He walked several steps before answering. They came for my brother. Ethan was simple-minded, didn't understand why they wanted our father's land, didn't understand they meant to hurt him. His jaw tightened. I understood fine. So you shot them. They drew first. I was faster. He glanced at her. Does that frighten you? Harriet considered. Everything about Calder Shaw should frighten her, his size, his isolation, now this confession of violence. But she thought of his careful knock each morning. The way he'd given up his bed. How gently he'd shown her the forest's secrets. No, she said finally. It doesn't. Maybe it should. Maybe. She adjusted her snowshoes, finding her rhythm again. But you were protecting family. I can understand that. They walked in silence until the town disappeared behind them. Then Calder spoke again, voice rough. Ethan died anyway. Took fever that same winter. All that killing. And I couldn't save him from something I couldn't see or fight. And Mary, different fever, 2 years later, went through the valley, took dozens. She lasted longer than most. He stopped walking, faced her. Eleanor Hartley thinks I killed her. Others too. Easier to blame the man who's already got blood on his hands than accept that sometimes people just die. I don't believe that. You barely know me. I know enough. She met his eyes steadily. I know you could have left me to freeze that first day. Know you gave up your home to keep me comfortable. Know you treat me with more respect than any proper man in town would. She lifted her chin. That tells me more about your character than any gossip. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, or hope. You're not what I expected. Harriet Dawson. What did you expect? When I saw you at the station, some Eastern woman playing at frontier life. Soft, weak. He shook his head. I was wrong. They made it back to the cabin as shadows grew long. Harriet helped unpack supplies, noting how Calder had bought more than he'd mentioned sugar she knew he never used. Tea he didn't drink. Small luxuries she hadn't asked for, but he'd noticed she missed. Over dinner, venison stew again. But seasoned with fresh herbs from town, she asked, Do you regret it moving here? Cutting yourself off? He considered, Used to think I was punishing myself. Now. He looked around the cabin, at her mending basket by the chair, her shawl on the peg, small signs of her presence that had somehow made the space warmer. Now I think maybe I was just waiting. For what? He didn't answer, but his eyes found hers across the table, and something passed between them, understanding. Maybe, or recognition. 2 people who'd been alone by choice and circumstance, finding solace in shared silence. That night, as Harriet lay in bed listening to the wind, she thought about Eleanor Hartley's warnings. Darkness and violence. Perhaps it was true, but there was gentleness too, and honor, and a kind of steady strength that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't in years. Outside, wolves howled in the distance. Inside, Calder tended the fire, keeping the darkness at bay, and Harriet slept deep and dreamless, unafraid. Spring came slow to the mountains, melting snow revealing mud and dead grass before green shoots finally pushed through. Harriet had been at the cabin 3 months, long past when she'd meant to leave, but leaving meant deciding where to go, and that decision grew harder each day. She was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. Calder was in the woods checking trap lines, not due back until evening. Her hand went to the rifle he'd taught her to use, but she recognized one of the riders before needing it. Jedediah Graves sat his horse like a man who owned the world, or at least thought he should. Beside him rode another man older, wearing a badge that caught the afternoon sun. They stopped just outside the yard, making no move to dismount. Miss Dawson. Jed tipped his hat with mocking courtesy. Thought I'd find you here. Mr. Graves. She kept her voice steady, though her heart raced. What brings you this far from town? Concern for your welfare. His smile was cold. Word is you've been living in sin with Shaw. As the man who brought you to Iron Pass, I feel responsible. Your responsibility ended at the train station. Did it? He leaned forward in his saddle. Sheriff McKenna here thinks different. Thinks maybe Shaw's holding you against your will. Man like that, with his history, wouldn't be the first woman to disappear in these woods. The sheriff, weathered face unreadable, spoke up. Just need to hear from you directly. Miss, you hear of your own choosing. I am. And Shaw hasn't bothered you, threatened you? Heat flooded her cheeks at the implication. Mister, Shaw has been nothing but respectful, more than I can say for present company. Jed's face darkened. You forget yourself. No decent woman chooses to live unmarried with a man. Then I suppose I'm not decent by your standards. She lifted her chin. Good thing I don't live by them. You sharp-tongued little... Jed swung down from his horse, advancing on her. That's far enough. Calder's voice came from the tree line. He emerged silent as always, rifle loose in his hands but ready. His eyes never left Jed as he positioned himself between the men and Harriet. Shaw. The sheriff straightened in his saddle. Just checking on the lady's welfare. She tell you she's fine? She did. Then you've got no business here. Jed stepped forward. She's made herself your woman. That your claim... She's made herself nothing. She's her own woman, choosing where to stay. Something you couldn't understand. I understand plenty. Understand you saw an opportunity, desperate woman. No money, nowhere to go. Easy prey for a man like you. Calder's jaw tightened. Careful, Graves. Or what you'll shoot me like you shot those men in Copper Hill. Jed's hand moved toward his pistol. Maybe that's what you need, someone to put you down like the animal you are. Stop! Harriet stepped around Calder, placing herself between the men. Mr. Graves, you came here playing concerned citizen, but we both know better. You're angry because I didn't crawl back to Missouri after you rejected me. Angry because I found something better than what you offered. Better, Jed laughed harsh. Living rough in a one-room shack with a killer. Living honest with a man who sees me as I am, not as he wished I'd be. She moved closer, voice dropping. You looked at me and saw small hands, sun-damaged skin, work-worn clothes. You saw failure. He saw strength. That's the difference between you. You think pretty words change what this is. You're shacked up with Shaw, ruined for any decent man. Like you, she smiled cold. I'll take ruined over respectable. If respectable means living with a man who judges worth by smooth hands and proper height. Jed's face went purple. You little... He grabbed for her arm. It happened fast. Calder dropped his rifle, surging forward. But Harriet was faster, bringing her knee up sharp into Jed's middle, doubling him over. The move her brothers taught her, saying a small woman needed equalizers. Jed stumbled back, gasping. The sheriff fought a smile. Seems the lady can handle herself. Graves, we should go. This isn't over. Jed wheezed, glaring at Calder. Man like you doesn't get happiness, doesn't get a second chance. I'll make sure of it. You don't know what I'm capable of, Calder said, voice deadly quiet. But test me, and you'll find out. Something in his tone must have penetrated Jed's anger. He backed toward his horse, mounting clumsy. This isn't over, he repeated, but it sounded more like fear than threat. They watched the riders disappear down the trail. Only when they were gone did Harriet realize she was shaking. Calder's hand touched her shoulder, gentle as falling snow. You all right? Fine, just angry. She turned to face him. How dare he come here, implying, suggesting... He's not worth your anger. Aren't you mad? At him, no. Man like that's too small to waste fury on. His thumb brushed her cheek, coming away wet. She hadn't realized she was crying. But if he'd hurt you... You'd have killed him. Without hesitation. The simple truth of it should have frightened her. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch. I can take care of myself. I saw nice knee work. Despite everything, she laughed. Brothers, they figured I'd need it someday. Smart men. His hand still cupped her cheek. Harriet, don't. She pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself. Don't say whatever you're thinking. Not because of him, not because you think I need protecting or comforting. He studied her with those patient wolf eyes. What if that's not why? Then, her breath caught. Then wait until it's just about us, not about proving something to men like Graves. Calder nodded slow. Fair enough. They went inside together, routine movements of preparing dinner made strange by what hung unspoken between them. Harriet's hands shook as she sliced bread. 3 months of careful boundaries, of maintained distance, threatened to crumble. He'll make trouble, she said finally. Men like him don't take humiliation well. Let him try. I'm serious, Calder. He has influence in town. Friends. He could make life difficult. Only if we care what town thinks. Don't you? He set down his coffee cup, considering. Used to when Mary was alive. Wanted to fit in, be respectable for her sake. After, what was the point? They'd made up their minds about me. That's no way to live. It was enough. Until what? His eyes found hers across the table. Until you hung that first shirt on the line. Until you made coffee without asking how I take it. Until this place started feeling less like a tomb and more like a home. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Harriet's throat went tight. Calder. I know. Not because of Graves. He stood, moving to the window. But he was right about one thing. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Don't! She stood too, anger flashing through her. Don't you dare decide what I deserve. I've had enough of men making those choices for me. I'm trying to protect you. From what from you? She moved closer, forcing him to look at her. The man who gave me shelter, who treats me with respect, who taught me to shoot and snowshoe and read weather signs. That's who you're protecting me from. From a man with blood on his hands. From someone who couldn't save the people he loved. From... She kissed him, rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his, cutting off the litany of self-recrimination. For a moment, he froze. Then his arms came around her, pulling her against him like she was air and he'd been drowning. When they broke apart, both breathing hard. She kept her hands fisted in his shirt. I don't need protecting. Calder Shaw. What I need is to make my own choices, and I choose this. Choose you. Unless... Sudden uncertainty flooded through her. Unless you don't. He silenced her with another kiss, deeper this time. One hand tangling in her hair while the other spread across her back. When he pulled away, his eyes were dark with emotion. I've wanted to do that since the day you told Eleanor Hartley you weren't frightened of me. He admitted, Why didn't you? Because you deserved time, space, the chance to leave if you wanted. His thumb traced her jaw. Because I knew once I kissed you, I'd never want to stop. Heat flooded through her at the promise in his voice. Then don't stop. He studied her face like he was memorizing it. Then he stepped back, putting space between them. Not tonight, not with Graves's poison still in the air. He touched her cheek, gentle. When I make you mine proper, it'll be because we both choose it clear-headed, not because some fool made us angry. Frustration and admiration warred in her chest. Even now, even with passion darkening his eyes and tension in every line of his body. He thought of her dignity first. You're a complicated man, Calder Shaw, and you're a remarkable woman. Harriet Dawson. He moved toward his pallet by the stove. Sleep. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. But as she lay in bed that night, listening to his restless movements, she knew what came next. Knew it with the same certainty she'd known to follow him into the woods that first day. The question wasn't what it was when, and how much trouble Jedediah Graves would cause before they got there. The decision to move into town came gradually, built from small moments. Harriet mending clothes by lamplight, squinting at tiny stitches. The way townsfolk looked at her when she accompanied Calder for supplies, part curiosity, part judgment. The stack of finished shirts and dresses with nowhere to sell them. "You could set up shop," Calder said one evening, watching her work. "Your needlework's better than anything Morrison stocks." With what money and who'd rent to a fallen woman living in sin? She bit through thread harder than necessary. "We could change that." She looked up sharp. "What are you saying?" He met her eyes steady. "I'm saying we could make it proper, legal, if you wanted." Her heart stuttered. In the weeks since Jed's visit, since that kiss that changed everything, they'd maintained careful boundaries, separate sleeping arrangements, fleeting touches, charged looks that promised more, always held in check by Calder's iron control and her own uncertainty. "Is that a proposal?" "It's an option." He shifted, uncomfortable. "No, it's not romantic. No, you deserve better than a practical arrangement, but it would solve problems." Practical. The word tasted bitter. Like buying a horse or filing a land claim. "That's not." He stood abrupt, pacing to the window. "I'm no good at this. Mary and I, we'd known each other since children. Courting was just expected, natural. This is different." "Because I'm not Mary." "Because you're you." He turned back. "Because I lie awake thinking about your laugh. Because watching you stand up to Graves made me want things I thought I'd buried. Because practical is the only word I can say without scaring you off with the truth. Which is that I'd marry you tomorrow if you'd have me. Not for propriety or business. Because the thought of you leaving makes me feel like I'm drowning. Because this cabin's only home when you're in it." His hands clenched at his sides. "Because I love you, Harriet Dawson, and I'm terrified of it." The words hung between them like morning mist. Harriet set down her sewing, stood slowly, crossed to him with measured steps, giving him time to retreat. He didn't. "You beautiful, foolish man." She touched his face, felt him lean into her palm. "I'm not going anywhere." "But you could. Open a shop, be independent, not need anyone." "Maybe I don't want to be independent. Maybe I want to be chosen, to choose back." She smiled soft. "Ask me proper, Calder, not as a business arrangement. Ask me as a man who loves me." He caught her hand, pressed it to his heart where she could feel it racing. Then he dropped to one knee, looking up at her with those wolf-gray eyes gone soft. "Harriet May Dawson, you came into my life like spring after endless winter. You saw through my darkness to something worth saving. Will you marry me, not for convenience or propriety, but because I can't imagine another day without you beside me?" "Yes." The word came out laughing and crying at once. "Yes, you impossible man." He surged up, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around the small cabin. When he set her down, they were both breathless, foreheads pressed together. "We'll need to go to town. Find the preacher. File papers." "Tomorrow," she agreed. "But tonight." "Tonight." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Tonight I don't want to sleep alone. Tonight I want to be with my intended. Proper can wait for tomorrow." Heat flared in his gaze. "Harriet, unless you don't want." He silenced her with a kiss that stole thought, deep and claiming. When they broke apart, his voice was rough. "Wanting's never been the question, only what's right. Right is what we choose together, and I choose this. Choose you, now." They came together like storm meeting mountain, inevitable, powerful, transformative, later, wrapped in quilts before the dying fire. Harriet traced lazy patterns on Calder's chest. "No regrets?" he asked. "Only that we waited so long. Had to be sure, both of us." And now, His arms tightened around her. Now I'm never letting go. Morning brought reality. They dressed careful, avoiding each other's eyes like shy youngsters. But when Calder held out his hand to help her into the wagon, the touch sparked memory of the night's intimacies. "Ready?" he asked. "For town, for marriage, for whatever Jed Graves stirs up." "All of it." She squeezed his hand. "Then yes, I'm ready." The ride to Iron Pass passed in comfortable silence. But as buildings came into view, Harriet noticed something off. Too many people on the street for a weekday. Groups clustered, talking low. "Something's happened," Calder murmured. They stopped outside Morrison's store. The proprietor hurried out, face pinched with worry. "Shaw, Miss Dawson, glad you're here." "What's wrong?" Calder helped Harriet down, hand protective on her back. "Meeting at the church. Jed Graves has been stirring folks up. Says you're a danger to the community. That Miss Dawson needs rescuing." Morrison glanced around nervous. "He's got support. People remember Copper Hill." "Let them remember," Calder said even. "He's calling for you to be run out, or worse." Morrison's voice dropped. "Some are listening." Harriet felt Calder tense beside her. "We'll go to the meeting." "That's what he wants. A confrontation." "Then he'll get one." She lifted her chin. "But not the kind he expects." The church was packed, voices rising in argument. They fell silent as Calder and Harriet entered. Jed stood at the front, face flushed with righteousness. "There he is, the killer, and his eyes raked over Harriet. "Companion." "Say what you mean. Graves." Calder's voice carried without rising. "Don't hide behind implications." "Fine. Your woman, living in sin, flaunting decency." "My fiancé," Calder corrected. "We're here to arrange the wedding." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jed's face darkened. "Doesn't change what you are, what you've done." "No, it doesn't." Calder stepped forward. "I killed 2 men who meant to hurt my brother. I'd do it again, but that's between me and God, not you and this town. A killer among us." "Is that what bothers you?" Harriet moved beside Calder. "His past, or that I chose him over you." "You didn't know what he was." "I knew exactly what he was. A man who judges by character, not appearance, who offers shelter without conditions, who treats me as equal, not property." She faced the crowd. "You want to talk about decency? Let's talk about a man who advertises for a wife like ordering goods from a catalog, who rejects a woman for having working hands, who comes armed to another man's home making threats." "I came concerned for your virtue." "My virtue's my own business, as is whom I choose to marry." An older woman stood Mrs. Patterson, the preacher's wife. "Miss Dawson speaks truth. Whatever Shaw's past, his present shows Christian charity. He helped during the fire last summer, brought meat to widows in winter. Acts speak louder than old stories." "Stories," Jed sputtered. "He killed—" "Men who drew first," Sheriff McKenna interrupted. "I looked into it after your complaint. Self-defense, clear as day, no charges filed." The crowd stirred, opinions shifting like wind through wheat. Jed saw it, grew desperate. "You're all fools. He's dangerous." "Only to those who threaten what's mine." Calder said quiet. "Leave us be, Graves. Find another woman to build your respectable life. This one's taken." "You think you've won? Think this changes anything?" Jed's hand twitched toward his gun. "Don't!" The sheriff stepped forward. "Whatever you're thinking, don't!" For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Jed deflated, backing away. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Harriet's voice rang clear. "Because we're done giving you power over our lives, done caring what small minds think." She turned to the preacher. "Reverend, we'd like to arrange a wedding." The crowd parted as they walked to the altar. Behind them, Jed stormed out, defeated. But Harriet didn't look back. Her eyes were on Calder, on the future they were claiming with both hands. "Next Saturday," the Reverend suggested. "Give you time to prepare." "Perfect," Harriet agreed. As they left the church, Calder caught her hand. "You were magnificent." "I was terrified." Couldn't tell. He helped her into the wagon. "Thank you for standing with me, for fighting." "Partners do that," she smiled. "Get used to it. Mr. Shaw, you're stuck with me now." "Can't think of anything I'd like more." As they drove home, and it was home now. Truly, Harriet felt the last chains of her old life fall away. Let people talk. Let Jed rage. She'd found something worth fighting for. And she'd never let go. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, carried by a stranger who wouldn't meet Calder's eyes. Harriet watched from the doorway as her husband read it, his face going stone still. Without a word, he handed it to her and walked into the woods. She read it twice before the words sank in. Official letterhead from Copper Hill. An inquiry into the deaths of Benjamin and Carl Watson. New witness testimony. Calder's presence requested for questioning. Her hands trembled as she set the letter on the table. They'd been married 3 weeks. 3 weeks of quiet happiness, building their life together, planning for the shop she'd open come spring. Now the past reached out with cold fingers, threatening to tear it all apart. When Calder hadn't returned by dusk, she took a lantern and followed his trail. She found him by the creek, sitting on a fallen log, staring at the water like it held answers. "You can't go," she said, settling beside him. "Have to. Running makes me look guilty." "You were never charged. Case was closed." "Someone's opened it again." His voice was flat, empty. "Maybe someone who lost money when the Watsons died. Maybe just someone who wants to see me hang. Then we'll go together. Face it together." He turned to her then, and the fear in his eyes stopped her heart. Not fear of the law or hanging fear of losing her. "Harriet, there's things about that day I never told anyone. Things that might come out." "Tell me now." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, voice low, "Ethan wasn't just simple. He had fit seizures, made him vulnerable. The Watsons knew. They waited until I was in town, came to the house." His hands clenched. "They didn't just want the land. They entertained themselves first. With him." Horror washed through her. "Oh, Calder. When I got back, found him bloodied and crying. Something in me went cold, told them to leave. They laughed, said simple folk didn't feel things like real people, said they'd be back." He met her eyes. "I didn't wait for them to draw first. Harriet, when they came back that night, I was ready. Shot them both before they cleared leather." "That's still self-defense." "Is it? I could have gone to the sheriff, could have taken Ethan and left town. Instead, I waited in the dark like an animal, planning their deaths." His voice broke. "What kind of man does that make me?" She took his face in her hands, forced him to look at her. "The kind who protects family, the kind who seeks justice when the law won't, the kind I'm proud to call husband. You don't understand. If this comes out, then we'll face it, together." She kissed him hard, pouring all her fierce love into the contact. "I'm not Mary. Calder, I won't leave you to face darkness alone." He pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair. They sat like that until full dark, drawing strength from each other. Then they walked home hand in hand, to plan for war. The next morning brought another surprise. A rider from Copper Hill, but not official. A woman, travel-worn and desperate-eyed. She nearly fell from her horse in the yard. "Mr. Shaw, I'm Rachel Watson, Ben Watson's widow." Calder went rigid. Harriet stepped forward, hand on the rifle by the door. "State your business." "I'm here to warn you. It's my brother-in-law, Marcus. He's stirring up trouble, bringing in a judge from the capital. Says he wants justice, but—" She swallowed hard. "He wants your land. Always has. Figures if you hang, he can buy it cheap." "Why warn me?" Calder's voice was carefully neutral. Rachel met his eyes straight. Because I know what Ben was, what he did to your brother and others like him. His death was justice, even if I couldn't say so then. Tears tracked down her weathered cheeks. I've got 2 boys. Mr. Shaw. Don't want them growing up thinking their father was a hero. He wasn't. Harriet lowered the rifle. Come inside. You need food. Rest. They learned the full story over coffee and biscuit. Marcus Watson had found a man willing to swear he saw Calder shoot first, paid witness. But that might not matter to a traveling judge looking to clear cases quick. The hearing's in 3 days. Rachel said, Marcus expects you to run. Has men watching the roads. Then we go through the mountains. Harriet said, Calder knows trails they won't. You think I'm staying behind? They set out before dawn, leaving Rachel to rest and mind the cabin. The mountain route was hard, steep climbs, narrow passes, nights cold enough to see stars like ice chips. But they made good time, arriving in Copper Hill as the courthouse opened for the hearing. The courtroom was packed. Marcus Watson sat in front, prosperous and smug. The judge looked tired, impatient. Harriet's heart sank. This had the feel of a foregone conclusion. Calder Shaw, the judge intoned. You stand accused of the murders of Benjamin and Carl Watson. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor. Very well, Mr. Watson, present your evidence. The paid witness was obvious, shifting eyes. Rehearsed story. He claimed to have seen everything from behind a barn, watched Calder gun down 2 unarmed men in cold blood. Did anyone else see this? Calder's appointed lawyer asked, clearly going through motions. No, sir, just me. Convenient. The judge frowned. Watch your tone, counselor. Harriet felt rage building. This wasn't justice, it was theater. She stood abruptly. Your Honor, I have information relevant to this case. Young woman, sit down. You're not a witness. No, but Rachel Watson is Ben Watson's widow. She's willing to testify about her husband's character, about what he did to Ethan Shaw and others. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus Watson shot to his feet. That woman's hysterical with grief, not competent. Let me be the judge of that. The judge's eyes sharpened, sensing drama that might enliven his dull circuit. Where is this Mrs. Watson? Here, Your Honor. Rachel entered from the back, dressed in widow's weeds but standing tall. She moved to the witness chair with quiet dignity. Mrs. Watson, the judge began carefully. You wish to testify about your late husband. I wish to tell the truth, Your Honor, something I should have done 3 years ago. She spoke clear and steady about Ben's cruelties, about finding bloodied clothes, hearing him brag about teaching lessons to those he deemed lesser, about the night he and Carl came home laughing about what they'd done to the simple boy. I was glad when I heard they were dead, she finished. May God forgive me, but I was glad. Mr. Shaw did what the law wouldn't protected the innocent. The courtroom erupted. Marcus Watson shouted about family loyalty, about lies. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, Mrs. Watson. These are serious allegations. I have his journal. Rachel pulled a worn book from her bag. Ben wrote everything down. His activities, names, dates. What he did to the Shaw boy is there, and worse. The judge took the journal, face paling as he read. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, he looked up. Mr. Shaw, please stand. Calder rose, Harriet beside him. Based on this new evidence, and the clear indication of self-defense and defense of others, I find the defendant not guilty of murder. Furthermore, he fixed Marcus Watson with a cold stare. I recommend investigation into the crimes detailed in this journal. Court dismissed. The gavel fell like thunder. Marcus Watson fled, knowing what investigation would bring. The crowd dispersed, murmuring, but Harriet only had eyes for Calder, who stood frozen like he couldn't believe it was over. "It's done," she whispered. "You're free." He pulled her against him right there in the courtroom, past caring about propriety. "Because of you. You and Rachel both." Rachel approached hesitant. "Mr. Shaw, I know I can't undo what Ben did." "You told the truth," Calder said simply. "That's enough. More than enough." "What will you do now?" Harriet asked her. "Start over. Somewhere Ben's shadow doesn't reach." She managed a small smile. "Maybe we all get second chances." They left Copper Hill that afternoon, taking the main road this time. No one followed, no one threatened. The past, finally, truly, was buried. That night, camped under stars, Calder held Harriet close. "I thought I'd lost everything. You, our life, our future." "Never." She kissed him soft. "I told you I don't leave. Not ever." "My fierce warrior wife." His voice held wonder. "How did I get so lucky?" "Not luck. Choice." She settled against his chest. "We chose each other. Choose each other still. That's stronger than luck." They made love under the open sky, celebrating freedom and future both. And when they returned home, it was to truly begin, no shadows following, no threats looming. Just two people building a life together, one chosen day at a time. Rachel's letter came a month later. She'd settled in California with her boys, started a boarding house, found peace. At the bottom, a postscript, "Thank you for showing me courage, looks like truth." Harriet pinned the letter to the wall of her new shop, where she could see it daily. A reminder that the past could be faced and overcome. That truth, however painful, led to freedom. And that second chances, when truly earned, could bloom into something beautiful. The smell hit them first, smoke, thick and acrid, carrying on the wind like death's calling card. Harriet dropped the bucket she was filling, water splashing across her boots. Above the tree line, black clouds rolled where no clouds should be. "Fire!" Calder breathed, already moving. "Big one." They could hear it now, a distant roar like a hungry beast. Through the trees came flashes of orange light, not the controlled burn of a campfire, but something wild and consuming. "The town," Harriet said, understanding hitting cold. "If it reaches Iron Pass." Calder was already throwing supplies into saddlebags. "Take the mare, ride to town, warn them. I'll gather the mountain folk." "We stay together." "No." He gripped her shoulders. "Town needs warning fast. Buildings that close, fire will jump roof to roof. People need time to create fire breaks, save what they can." His eyes blazed fierce as the distant flames. "I'll be right behind with help. Go." She went, pushing the mare hard down the mountain trail. The smoke thickened with each mile, turning afternoon sun to bloody twilight. By the time she reached Iron Pass's outskirts, ash fell like gray snow. The town was chaos. Some loaded wagons with valuables, planning to flee. Others stood frozen, watching the hell glow approaching through the forest. No organization, no plan, just panic spreading faster than flame. Harriet rode straight to the church, yanked the bell rope until her hands bled. The clanging cut through confusion, drew people like moths. "Listen," she shouted from the church steps. "Running won't save the town, but fighting might. We need every able body making fire breaks, clear brush from around buildings, soak rooftops. Work together or lose everything." "Who put you in charge?" someone yelled. "The fire did." She pointed to the advancing wall of smoke. "You want to argue authority while your homes burn, or you want to save this town?" Sheriff McKenna pushed through the crowd. "She's right. Morrison. Get men clearing a break along Creek Street. Patterson. Organize water brigades. Women and children wet down every roof, every wall. Move." They moved. Fear transformed to purpose, panic to determination. Harriet worked alongside them, chopping brush until her shoulders screamed, hauling water until her legs shook. The fire's roar grew louder, heat pressing against them like a living thing. Then Calder arrived with 20 mountain men, all carrying tools and grim faces. They'd fought fire before, knew its ways. Under his direction, they widened the firebreak, felled strategic trees, created a barrier of bare earth the flames couldn't cross, they hoped. "Wind's shifting," one of the mountain men called. "Coming straight for us." "Then we make our stand." Calder found Harriet in the crowd, pulled her close for one fierce moment. "Whatever happens, we face it together." She pressed her forehead to his. "Always." The fire hit the firebreak like a wave against stone. Flames leaped, searched for fuel, found little, but wind carried embers over their defenses, starting spot fires on roofs, in yards. What followed was the longest night of Harriet's life. They fought with buckets and wet blankets, shovels and bare hands. Calder led crews to threaten buildings, seeming to be everywhere at once. Harriet coordinated water supplies, keeping the bucket brigades moving. Her dress caught fire once she beat it out and kept working. Jedediah Graves was there too. She noticed with surprise, soot-stained and desperate, working his water pump as his store's roof smoldered. When the pump handle broke, he looked around wild-eyed, lost. Harriet didn't think, just grabbed a ladder and bucket. "Hold this steady," she ordered. His face cycled through emotions, shame, gratitude, fear before he gripped the ladder. She climbed, dumped water on the growing flames, again and again, until that roof was safe. "Why?" he gasped when she climbed down. "Because the fire doesn't care about our grudges." She was already moving to the next crisis. Neither should we. Dawn came pale through smoke, revealing a changed world. The forest was black bones against gray sky, but Iron Pass stood scarred, singed but standing. The firebreak held. The town survived. People collapsed where they stood, exhaustion hitting like a physical blow. Harriet found herself sitting in the dirt, back against a water trough, unable to move another step. Calder dropped beside her, face lined with soot and fatigue. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it. That bell, that speech you gave them spine when they needed it most." "We all did it, together." Across the square, she saw Eleanor Hartley bandaging burned hands, ignoring her ruined dress. Morrison passed out his water freely. No thought of payment. Even Graves worked among them, stripped of pride. Just another neighbor in need. "Funny what fire teaches," Calder observed. "What's that?" "What matters? What doesn't?" He took her hand, traced the blisters there. These hands saved his store. After everything. Wasn't about him. Was about doing what's right. "That's my wife. Fierce as fire. Forgiving as rain." Sheriff McKenna approached, exhaustion in every line. "Shaw, town owes you. Those mountain men you brought couldn't have held without them." "Town doesn't owe me anything. We live here too." "That's just it." The sheriff's eyes moved between them. "Don't think folks saw it that way before. You were the hermit in the hills, the killer from Copper Hill. Now," he gestured at the saved town, "now you're the man who brought help, who led the fight, who saved us." "We all saved each other," Calder said firmly. But McKenna was right. In the days that followed, as the town rebuilt and recovered, something fundamental had shifted. People nodded to Calder on the street. Women who'd whispered about Harriet now sought her advice on organization, remembering her calm leadership during crisis. A week after the fire, town council met in the partially charred church. Harriet attended, curious about rebuilding plans. She didn't expect what came next. "We need a fire brigade," Mayor Thompson announced. "Organized, trained, ready for next time." He looked directly at Calder. "Shaw, will you lead it?" Calder straightened, surprised. "I'm no town leader. You led when it counted. That's what we need." "And Mrs. Shaw," Eleanor Hartley stood, voice clear. "We need someone to coordinate emergency supplies. Medical materials, food stores, water barrels positioned strategic-like. Would you consider taking that on? Harriet felt tears threaten. Acceptance, offered freely from the woman who'd warned her away. Yes, of course. Good. Thompson nodded. Fire taught us we're stronger together than apart. About time we started acting like it. Walking home that evening, Harriet slipped her hand into Calder's. How things change. For the better. You'll be good at it, leading the fire brigade, teaching them what you know. And you'll reorganize this entire town, make them ready for whatever comes next. He smiled down at her. My fierce little general. She laughed. From rejected mail-order bride to emergency coordinator. Not the life I imagined. A better. She thought of that girl stepping off the train. Small and scorned and alone. Of the woman she'd become chosen and choosing. Building something worthwhile with hands that knew work and hearts that knew love. Better, she agreed. So much better. That night, as they lay entwined in their bed, their true bed now. No more separate pallets. Calder traced the healing burns on her arms. I was terrified, he admitted. When I saw you on that ladder, flames all around. Thought I might lose you. Never, she echoed his words from after the trial. I don't leave. Remember, not even for fire. My brave one. He kissed each small burn. My love. They made love gently, mindful of tender spots and exhausted muscles. But afterward, holding each other as sleep beckoned, they felt more solid somehow, tested by flame and found true. No longer just two damaged people finding solace together, but partners proven in the forge of crisis. The fire had taken much forest, wildlife, some buildings despite their efforts, but it had given something to perspective. Community. The knowledge that when tested, they'd stood together and prevailed. And for Harriet, watching her husband finally accepted by the town that had shunned him, it had given something precious beyond words, the sight of Calder Shaw taking his rightful place not as outsider or killer or hermit, but as protector, leader, hero. The fire had burned away more than trees. It had burned away the past, leaving room for something new to grow. Something like hope, something like home. Harriet's tailoring and mending opened on a Tuesday morning in May, the bell above the door chiming bright as hope. The shop was small, just the front room of a building near Morrison's store, but it was hers. Every stitch in the curtains, every arrangement of thread and needle, spoke of dreams made real. It's perfect, Calder said, running his hand over the counter he'd built himself. You've done something fine here. We've done something fine. She straightened his collar. A wife's casual intimacy. None of this happens without you believing I could. Believing was easy. You're the one who did the work. The bell chimed, and her first customer entered, Mrs. Patterson, the preacher's wife, carrying a bundle of worn clothes. Mrs. Shaw, I've been waiting for you to open. These are past my skill to mend proper. Let's see what we can do. Harriet spread the garments carefully, professional despite her racing heart. This was it, the test of whether the town would truly accept her new place among them. By noon, she'd had 6 customers. By week's end, more work than she could handle alone. The women came first for mending, for alterations, for the simple pleasure of gossip in a space that welcomed them. But soon, men appeared too, sheepish about torn work clothes, needing sturdy stitching that would hold through hard labor. You'll need help, Calder observed one evening, finding her bent over the sewing by lamplight. Maybe, eventually. She set aside the shirt she was mending. For now, I just want to savor this, building something myself. He understood. After years of being judged and dismissed, the shop was more than business, it was proof. Proof that work-worn hands could create beauty, that a small woman could stand tall, that choices made in desperation could lead to prosperity. But the shop brought challenges, too. On a Thursday afternoon, Harriet looked up from her work to find Jedediah Graves in her doorway. He'd lost weight since the fire, his clothes hanging loose, but his eyes held something new: uncertainty, maybe even humility. Mrs. Shaw." He removed his hat. "Might I speak with you?" She set down her needle carefully. "Mr. Graves." "I owe you thanks. For the fire. My store would have burned without your help?" "Anyone would have done the same." "No." He stepped inside, closing the door. "Not anyone. Not after how I—" He stopped, started again. "I was wrong. About you, about Shaw, about everything." Harriet studied him, this man who'd rejected her, hunted them, tried to destroy their happiness. She could send him away, nurse the grudge. But she thought of the fire, of how crisis stripped away pretense and showed true character. His had been small, yes, but not evil, just limited. "What do you want, Mr. Graves?" "To apologize, properly, and—" He pulled out a wrapped package. "To commission work, if you'll have my business." She unwrapped it slowly. Fine wool fabric, midnight blue, expensive. "What's this for?" "A suit. For my wedding." His cheeks colored. "I'm engaged to Miss Pemberton from Elk Ridge. A school teacher. She's nothing like what I thought I wanted. She's better." Despite everything, Harriet felt her lips twitch. Work-worn hands. Ink-stained fingers. A ghost of a smile. "Speaks 3 languages. Argues theology. Thinks my opinions need educating. I'm terrified of her. It's wonderful." Love does that. Terror and wonder both. I was a fool, Mrs. Shaw, about what matters in a wife, about what makes a man worthwhile. He met her eyes. "Shaw saved this town. You gave it backbone, while I—" He shrugged. "I showed my true measure, small and mean and grasping." "You're here now. That takes courage." "Will you make the suit, I understand, if you'd rather not?" "I'll make it." She rewrapped the fabric. Everyone deserves to look their best when pledging their life to another. Even fools who learn late. Relief washed over his face. "Thank you. And Mrs. Shaw, I'm glad you found what I was too blind to see. You and Shaw, you fit, like pieces meant to be together." After he left, Harriet sat quiet in her shop, marveling at the strange turns of life. 6 months ago, that man had crushed her dreams. Now he came hat in hand, seeking her skill, acknowledging her worth. The world had shifted on its axis, and she'd helped push it. Summer bloomed full and golden. The shop thrived. Calder's fire brigade drilled weekly, building the town's confidence along with its preparedness. They expanded the cabin, adding rooms for the future they both hoped for. Life settled into rhythms of contentment. Then came the night Harriet woke to find Calder gone from their bed. She found him on the porch, staring at stars. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything." He pulled her onto his lap. "Sometimes I can't believe this is real. You, the shop, the town accepting us. Feels like I'll wake up and be alone again." "You're not dreaming." She turned in his arms, straddled him. "Feel this." She kissed him deep. "Real." Her hands found skin. This, another kiss, also real. He groaned, pulled her closer. "Harriet." "I'm here. We're here. This life we've built, it's ours. No one can take it." They made love on the porch, under stars and sky, claiming their happiness with bodies and hearts and whispered promises. Afterward, wrapped in a quilt, they watched dawn paint the mountains gold. "I want children," she said quiet. "Your children, soon." His arms tightened around her. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She turned to face him. "I want to see you teach them woodcraft. Want to sew their clothes and pack their lunches and watch them grow strong and kind like their father. Stubborn and fierce like their mother." "That too." She smiled. "Think we're ready. Think we've been ready since the day you stood in that church and claimed me in front of everyone." He kissed her forehead. Just been waiting for you to know it too. Fall arrived with its painted leaves and crisp air. The shop needed expansion. Harriet had hired 2 local girls to help with the overflowing work. The fire brigade had grown to 30 members, and Harriet's waistline had begun to expand in the way that made women smile knowingly and men treat her like spun glass. "I'm not fragile," she told Calder for the 100th time, finding him moving her fabric bolts. "You're carrying precious cargo. Women have been doing this work since Eve. I can lift cloth." But she didn't really mind his protectiveness, not when it came with wonderstruck looks and gentle hands on her changing body, not when she caught him whittling tiny animals for someday. The day she felt the first flutter of movement, she was fitting Eleanor Hartley for a winter coat. She gasped, hand to her belly. "And Mrs. Shaw, are you well?" "Yes, the baby, it moved." Eleanor's professional mask cracked, revealing genuine joy. "Oh, how wonderful!" The first quickening, there's nothing like it. They ended up sharing tea, talking about pregnancy and preparations. The woman who'd warned her away from Calder now offered advice on morning sickness and swollen feet. Another bridge built, another past buried. That evening, she placed Calder's hand where she'd felt movement. They waited, patient, until there, a butterfly flutter against his palm. His eyes went wide, then bright with unshed tears. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your papa. I'm going to try so hard to deserve you." "You already do." Harriet covered his hand with hers. "You deserve all of this. The town's respect, the shop's success, this baby. You deserve to be happy. Calder Shaw." "As do you, Harriet Shaw." He kissed her softly. "My mail-order bride, who became so much more, became everything." "Yes," he agreed. "Everything." Winter approached with its promise of snow and quiet months. But this year, Harriet didn't dread the isolation. She had her shop, her work, her place in the community. She had a husband who looked at her like sunrise after endless night. She had life growing within her, promise of future bright as spring. Standing in her shop one December afternoon, watching snow fall past the windows, she thought of that desperate girl at the train station, the one with calloused hands and fading hopes. That girl could never have imagined this accepted, successful, loved. But maybe that was the point. Maybe you couldn't imagine the life you were meant for until you were living it. Maybe you had to be rejected by the wrong thing to find the right one. Maybe you had to walk into the wilderness, trust a stranger, fight fire and prejudice and your own fears to discover who you really were. The bell chimed. A customer entered, bringing cold air and purpose. Harriet smoothed her hands over her expanding belly, adjusted her measuring tape, and went to work. She was exactly where she belonged. Spring arrived with their daughter born as the last snow melted, crying strong and fierce into the warming world. They named her Mary Eleanor Shaw, honoring both past and present. The woman who'd first worn the coat that sheltered Harriet and the woman who'd offered unexpected friendship. "She's perfect," Calder whispered, cradling the tiny bundle while Harriet recovered. "Look at these hands, already making fists like she's ready to fight the world." "Gets that from both of us," Harriet murmured, exhausted but glowing. "Poor world doesn't stand a chance." The birth had been hard 2 days of labor that tested every ounce of strength Harriet possessed. But Doc Winters, called from town, said she'd done remarkable well. "Strong stock," he pronounced. "This little one will thrive." And thrive she did. Mary grew round and rosy, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's determined chin. The cabin filled with her sounds, coos, and cries, and eventually delighted laughter. Calder, who'd lived so long in silence, seemed to expand with each baby noise, as if her voice was teaching him to speak again. "You're besotted," Harriet accused one evening, finding him making faces at Mary instead of finishing dinner preparations. "Completely." He didn't even try to deny it. She smiled at me. Real smile, not gas. Everything she does is a miracle to you. Because it is. He transferred Mary to her arms, went to tend the stove. Never thought I'd have this again. Family, future. Every smile feels like a gift I don't deserve. Calder Shaw. Her voice went stern. If you start that don't deserve nonsense again, I'll take a wooden spoon to you. You're a good man, a wonderful father, and absolutely deserving of every happiness. He turned from the stove, eyes suspiciously bright. How'd I get so lucky? Not luck, she reminded him. Choice. We chose each other. Choose each other still. The shop reopened when Mary was 6 weeks old, with a cradle in the corner where Harriet could work while tending her daughter. The ladies of Iron Pass cooed over the baby, offered advice, shared their own stories. Mary became the shop's unofficial mascot, sleeping through the chatter of customers and the rhythmic sound of sewing. One afternoon, Harriet looked up from her work to find an unexpected visitor, Rachel Watson, the widow who'd testified for Calder. She looked well, California sun having bronzed her skin and eased the lines of worry. Mrs. Shaw, I hope I'm not intruding. So, Mrs. Watson. Not at all. Please, come in. Harriet set aside her sewing. What brings you back to Oregon? Settling Ben's estate finally, and wanting to thank you both properly. Rachel admired Mary sleeping in her cradle. She's beautiful. You're blessed. We are in so many ways. Rachel reached into her bag, pulled out an envelope. I've been successful in California. The boarding house thrives. This is, call it overdue payment for justice served. Harriet opened the envelope, gasped at the banknote inside. This is too much. It's not enough, but it's what I can offer. Rachel's eyes were steady. You and your husband gave me freedom from fear, gave my boys a chance to grow up without their father's shadow. There's no price on that. We can't accept. You can, you will. Rachel smiled. Consider it investment in your shop, or savings for that little one's education, or simply proof that sometimes doing right brings reward. They talked until Mary woke hungry. Rachel held the baby while Harriet nursed. Two women bound by strange history, finding friendship in shared understanding. When Rachel left, promising to write, Harriet felt another circle close, another wound heal. Summer brought changes. The shop expanded into the building next door. Harriet hired more help, trained local girls in fine needlework. What started as survival had become enterprise, employing half a dozen women, providing income and independence. Calder's fire brigade had evolved too, becoming a general emergency service. When floods threatened in spring, when accidents happened at the mill, when anyone needed organized help, they called on Shaw and his men. The hermit had become a pillar of community. Town council wants to pay you, Harriet informed him one evening. Official salary for fire chief duties. Don't need payment for protecting our home. You need payment because you spend half your time on town business now. We have a daughter to provide for. Take the salary, you stubborn man. He grumbled, but agreed. Another step toward belonging, toward being woven into Iron Pass's fabric so thoroughly that no one remembered when he'd been outside it. Fall arrived with its familiar rhythms. Mary learned to crawl, then pull herself up on furniture, then take wobbling steps between her parents' outstretched arms. Her first word was Papa, which made Calder insufferably smug for days. She's smart, he boasted to anyone who'd listen. Knows quality when she sees it. Impossible man, Harriet muttered, but she was smiling. On a crisp October afternoon, Harriet was fitting a wedding dress when familiar bells chimed, not her shop door church bells, ringing the pattern for emergency assembly, Calder's fire signal. She ran outside with other shopkeepers, saw smoke rising from the sawmill. Her heart clenched fire again, always fire in a town built of wood. But this time was different. This time they were ready. Calder's brigade responded swift and organized. Water wagons were already positioned. Sand buckets ready, evacuation routes clear. What could have been catastrophe became mere crisis, contained within an hour. Watching her husband direct the response calm, competent, respected, Harriet felt pride swell in her chest. The man who'd once hidden in the woods now stood at the town's heart, essential and valued. "Your man does good work," Morrison commented, standing beside her. "He does. Town's lucky you walked into those woods that day. Lucky he found you." "We found each other," she corrected gently. That evening, washing soot from Calder's hair while Mary played at their feet, Harriet asked, "Any regrets about giving up the solitude?" "How could I regret this?" He caught her hand, kissed the palm. "You and Mary, the shop, the town finally seeing me as more than my worst moment. It's everything I never dared want. You've earned it, all of it. We've earned it." He pulled her onto his lap, careful of Mary crawling near. Together. Winter came gentle that year, snow falling soft and steady. The shop bustled with holiday orders. The fire brigade organized winter safety patrols. Mary learned new words daily, chattering in her own language about everything she saw. On Christmas Eve, they hosted dinner for those with nowhere else to go, widowers from the mountain. New arrivals still finding their feet, even Eleanor Hartley, whose husband was traveling. The cabin that had once sheltered silence now rang with voices and laughter. "This is good," Calder said quiet, surveying the crowded room. "Never thought I'd want this again, people. Noise, connection. But you made me brave enough to try." "You were always brave. Just needed reminding that brave doesn't mean alone." He kissed her there in the kitchen, deep and thorough, until Mary tugged at their legs demanding attention. They separated laughing, scooping up their daughter, returning to their guests. Later, after everyone had gone and Mary slept peaceful in her crib, they sat by the fire planning the coming year. The shop would add ready-made clothes alongside custom work. The fire brigade would train neighboring towns. Mary would need schooling soon. Playmates, a wider world than the cabin could offer. "We'll build her a good life," Calder promised. "Safe and stable and full of choices." "She'll be strong," Harriet agreed. "Able to stand up to any Jed Graves who tries to judge her worth by her hands or height. With you as her mother, she'll be unstoppable." They made love by firelight, slow and sweet, celebrating survival and success and the simple miracle of choosing each other day after day. Outside, snow continued falling, blanketing the world in pristine white. Inside, their world was warm and whole, and theirs. In the morning, Calder would wake first, stoking the fire and starting coffee. Harriet would follow, checking on Mary, beginning breakfast. They'd move through their morning dance, comfortable in routines built from trust and time. He'd kiss her before leaving for town duties. She'd wave from the shop door when he passed on patrol. Ordinary life, extraordinary in its very ordinariness, considering where they'd started. The girl who'd stepped off that train would never have imagined this. The man who'd retreated to the woods couldn't have dreamed it. But somehow, through rejection and acceptance, isolation and connection, fire and rebuilding, they'd created something neither could have achieved alone. A life, a family, a future bright with possibility. Standing in her shop that spring afternoon, their second spring as parents, Harriet watched through the window as Calder taught Mary to identify birds. His patience was endless, his joy evident even from a distance. "You know what you're capable of," she murmured, remembering his long-ago warning to Jed. What he was capable of was this love, protection, dedication, growth, the capacity to change, to choose hope over fear, to build rather than hide. The shop bell chimed. New customer, new opportunity. Harriet smoothed her apron, checked her smile in the mirror, and turned to greet whatever came next. She was Harriet Shaw, wife, mother, business owner, community member, no longer defined by calloused hands or small stature, but by choices made and chances taken, by the courage to follow a stranger into the woods and the wisdom to recognize home when she found it. The girl at the train station was gone, transformed into something stronger and truer. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, claimed her space, and loved without reservation. A woman who was exactly where and who she was meant to be. "Welcome," she said to the customer, and meant it wholly. "Welcome to my shop, my life, my happiness earned through trial and kept through choice. Welcome to the future we're building, one stitch, one day, one fierce act of love at a time. Welcome home." Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where in the world you're enjoying this tale. Please share your location in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts together. If you enjoyed Harriet and Calder's journey, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And if you really want to help more people discover these frontier romances, please hit that hype button to boost this story. Until next time, partners.